This presentation will be about examining the role of protective factors in at-risk urban youth. The city's project, under the guidance of Dr. Catherine Grant, is comprised of multiple studies whose overarching goal is to examine how stressful life experiences relate to the development of psychopathology and academic problems in at-risk urban youth. And specifically, the psychopathology we look at is anxiety and depression. In addition to this, the project strives to develop preventative programs along with interventions that reduce the effect of life stressors on the mental and academic success of students whose chronic stressors are associated with urban poverty. Introduction to the Stress and Learning Project. Cabrini Green in Chicago, Illinois was one of the largest public housing projects in the city from 1942 to 2011. Gang violence and poor living conditions contributed to the housing project's eventual demolition. The basis of this study was to examine what protective factors the children of the Cabrini Green projects used to cope with the chronic violence and oppression they experienced not just in their community but the surrounding neighborhoods as well. What makes youth classified as at risk? Children who are deemed at risk are said to continuously experience negative home, neighborhood, and school environments. This can be due to poor funding at schools or living in a neighborhood infested with gang and drug activity. Constant exposure to these stressors are associated with the development of negative coping mechanisms. What is a protective factor? A protective factor is a resource children use to cope with the stressors they face. For example, school or extracurricular activities can be used to help distract a child. In addition to places, resources within those systems can provide emotional support. These include a school counselor or teacher. If there are a lack of resources, the child may rely on themselves to cope by means of distraction through hobbies, or they may engage in avoidance of the problem altogether. The purpose of this presentation is to examine general places a child relies on as a protective factor. In addition to these places, I am interested in examining when in the development of the stressor or stressors do they rely on protective factors. Do they rely on them before the stressor occurs or in response to it? Data was collected in a span of 5 waves through qualitative interviews assessing different strategies children may use as a protective factor. These strategies are just who, what or why, where, and when. Within each of these main strategy headings, specific coping mechanisms are listed. For example, if a child uses a who strategy, they may use friends, romantic partners, God, or an older generational figure such as a grandparent. If a child uses a what or why strategy, they may use problem solving, distraction, or they may get help from others. If a child has a place that acts as a protective factor, it includes school, home, or their neighborhood. Ratings of these mechanisms were given on a Likert-like scale by the interviewer. The factors analyzed in this presentation were mentally, home, school, neighborhood, and any place that is not their school, home, or neighborhood. Basic frequency analyses were run on each of the different factors this presentation is focusing on. Results of the analyses are as follows and are stated in mean and standard deviation format. As the results show, at-risk youth rely upon themselves more often to cope with the stressors they face daily. In addition to self-reliance, participants use this protective strategy in response to a stressor more often. Future studies can benefit from this knowledge by adding to existing interventions and prevention programs targeted to at-risk urban youth in order to build resilience. In addition to new interventions and prevention programs, gender differences in coping can affect the success of a given intervention.